this power steering pump is that it's intermittent with the noise. Maybe you can hear it pausing, and it'll whine, and then it'll pause and it'll whine again. So it'll keep doing that, and then there'll be times where it doesn't make any noise, and times that it makes noise. Sometimes it'll be really loud. Sometimes it'll be mild. But anyways, it just keeps going on and off like that. And I've tried to prime the system several times, and we can't make it go away. We can't fix it. So what we're going to do is we're going to replace that pump today and see if we can't get rid of that noise. Here's where we get to test out our little mechanism down there. As you can see, we've got the two valves, the one on the left and the one on the bottom. The one on the left is connected to the power steering reservoir. Open up both those valves, that should drain all of the fluid out of the power steering reservoir down into our bucket down there. And because that complete mechanism is above the rack and pinion, above the height of the rack and pinion, it shouldn't drain any of the fluid out of the rack and pinion. And then that'll help us for when we disconnect that pump and replace it. We've got a little less oil making a mess. What we've done is we've hooked up a hose and we've routed it so that we can drain our fluid into the bucket. Now this is going to be new fluid. We just changed all this stuff probably a week or two ago, so the fluid should still be good, but we've got a clean bucket here. Whether or not we reuse the fluid, we can check the state of it, see if it's got anything in it. I highly doubt it. We cleaned everything really well before we installed everything, so there should be no contamination involved here. Again, up top here, we got the lid removed, and I want to note that there was no leaks or anything in this whole system. Everything was new. The high pressure line was new, the rack and pinion was new, the power steering pump was new. After everything was installed, there was no leaks. That wasn't an issue, that wasn't a problem. The fluid was the proper level. We had cycled the fluid through the system, but right from the beginning, this pump would make noise, and it'd be intermittent. It would make noise, and then it would stop making noise, and then it would be loud, and then it wouldn't be loud. And so that's what's brought us to this point to changing this pump here. We feel that it's no good. It was brand new, but sometimes brand new parts are no good too. So what we got here is the lid off of the reservoir. So we've got our atmosphere up top here, and that's going to help drain that fluid down into the bucket below. And down there we have our valving system where we open up those valves so that we can drain the fluid into the bucket. While that's draining, we want to remove our serpentine belt. And if you don't know the configuration, what you can do is make a sketch. Sometimes there's a sticker on the vehicle that'll tell you what the orientation of the belt is. But in this case, I'm not seeing one kicking around anywhere. Now right here on our tensioner, all we want is a 15 mil socket. In my case, it goes on there, and we're going to turn that clockwise, and we're going to release the tension, remove the serpentine belt. For anyone's interest, this is the new pump and reservoir that we've ordered. And there's a part number if anyone wants to reference that part number for this job. Now in my case, there's going to be 3 bolts holding that pump on there, and it'll be a 1/2 inch head. So 1/2 inch socket and ratchet, pull that out of there. You're going to move your pulley until your hole lines up where your bolt is, and remove those 3 bolts to get that off of there. With the reservoir sticking up to the top as it would be installed, and we take a look, you can see where those 3 holes are lining up with the holes in the pulley there. So you just line those pulley holes up, and that's how you're going to get your tools in there to get them bolts out. On the bottom is where our high pressure line is going to connect right there. And then this one here is going to be our return, our low pressure side back to reservoir. So this pumps it out, and then that's the return. It's pretty hard to get in there with the camera, but my wrench is actually on that high pressure line right there. And in my case, it ends up being a 5/8. So you want to remove this line first and then remove the pump. Right in here is where we've disconnected that high pressure line. Your wrench is going to go on the boss right there and unthread that out of the bottom, and the green O-ring is your sealing portion on the bottom of the pump there. Now with that removed and off to the side, we can remove the power steering pump, which is going to be those 3 bolts that are holding that on with the 1/2-inch head. We've got that power steering pump removed. Now, with our little modification there with our hose, before that hose just went in behind there and it wasn't connected to the frame. So we could have lifted that whole pump right up to the top here to disconnect that return line. But because of our modification, we can't lift it up all the way. So we're gonna have to remove our return line right down in here. That'll be a pair of pliers to remove that pinch clamp there. We're going to reinstall that return line there. We're going to install that pinch clamp, get everything back in place, start our high pressure hose, get that threaded started so by hand so we don't have any troubles, and then install our pump. Got everything installed again, 3 bolts, 1/2-inch head. We've got a 5/8 open end wrench for that high pressure line. Got our return line hooked up, got our serpentine belt on, and now what we're doing is we're refilling the reservoir, and I'm using this stuff right here, and I'm gonna put that in there and see if that helps out. As we're adding our oil and we're checking with our dipstick there to see what our level is, we're gonna continue to add and turn the wheels back and forth to prime the system with the vehicle not running here. We have our jack on the floor, just enough to get them wheels up off the floor, and we're going to turn those wheels side to side, and that's going to prime the fluid through. It's going to go from the power steering pump in through the rack and pinion and return back to the reservoir. And as we're doing that, we're going to continue to add fluid and then get it back to its proper level. While we're under here, we're also going to change our stabilizer bar links. So if we take a look up here, this is our stabilizer bar. And this is our little link, and it goes from there down to here. And that's going to be 18 millimeter. And then we've got a nut and a bolt on this one here. There's the nut, there's the bolt, and that's going to be 18 millimeter as well. If we come over here on this side, you can see where the bottom was bolted to the lower A-arm here. And then what we have here is that's where the top's bolted to the top part of the sway bar. We follow that along, and that's our sway bar that goes all the way across to the other side there. So I'm just going to be using the impact and open end wrench for the nut and bolt, and then just the bolt on the bottom. And that bolt just threads in right there on the bottom, no nut on the back. Here is the old and new, and there's a part number for anybody who's interested in replacement parts. And just recently we had a wheel alignment done on this vehicle, and I take a look in here and I'm feeling my rubber, and you can kind of tell that they didn't even bother greasing that. So we're going to grease that up with the expectation it's going to last longer. Here's the new stabilizer link installed. Again, 18 millimeter for the socket and the wrench. I'm just using the impact, tighten that up. We've also greased that outside tie rod end as well. After putting those sway bar links on, we found that our sway bar was loose. You could pull it from side to side in there. So we changed the bushings on that, and that's going to be a 21 mil socket to get those bolts off. So just take those bolts off, take that rubber bushing out of there and replace it. And then when you reinstall it, you got this locking clip here on either side. So basically what I did was I just made it equal length on either side to center that sway bar, and then tighten it back down again. Here's what that old bushing looked like, and you could pull it from side to side, so there was no tension or friction left in it, so it was really loose in there. In fact, the bushings were worse than the sway bar links, and I had a pair at home waiting to put them in for when it was time to do that. So if you want a part number on that, here's our part number here, and that's going to be a Moog part number. We're also replacing the sway bar links in the back, and you can see the new one that's on there. Right here's the old one. Now there's some flats on this side to hold it when you're trying to get that nut off of there, because this will spin. Because now that this old one here, it's pretty loose. It's not bad, but it's loose enough. We're gonna put all new stuff in. And if we take a look at the new one there, you can see the nut is on the inside, and this one too does have some flats on it. It's just harder to see. So that's what's gonna install the bottom end. And then that top one, there's just a bolt that goes into the frame there. And those should be 18 millimeter sockets to get those nuts and bolts in. Here's the old and new sway bar links here, and if anybody wants a part number, this is what I'm using to replace that. What we're gonna do is we're gonna continue to flush this and clean it all out, flush it a couple times and make sure that it's good. The reason we're doing this is we still have some mild noise coming from the pump. It should not be air entrapment in there by now. If you take a look at the top, you don't see any air bubbles in there anymore. So the only other thing I can suspect is contamination. And so that's why we're going to flush this repeatedly and make sure that we have a completely flushed and clean system. We put the new pump on, we took it for a drive, it was quiet, everything was going good, we're pretty happy with that, and then all of a sudden we got some mild noise coming back, again intermittently, same as before. Again, this time it wasn't as loud or as frequent as the last time. I don't believe that we have any air in the system because we've circulated the fluid several times to try and purge all that air out of there. The only thing I can think of is contamination. With our little modification down there, what we're doing is we're draining it. Again, we have the front end lifted up and we're turning the wheel side to side to purge that oil all through the system into the bucket there. Now when we take a look at the oil that we removed from there, you can see that that's pretty dark as compared to our fresh stuff that's right here. I'm going to continue to flush the system until I get the fluid coming out just as clean as this here, and let's hope that that's gonna solve our problem. That stuff looks pretty dark right there, and that's all new fluid as well. We did have the Lucas treatment we put in. Maybe that's a factor in why it's a little darker than maybe it should be. We're just gonna continue flushing the system and make sure that we've got all new clean fluid in there.